We're gonna so we're gonna start out. I'm gonna do a lot of talking about kind of what is cyber liability, how to avoid a claim, and then talk about cyber liability insurance. And we're actually going to take a look at my policy, the McGroarty and Bradburn insurance has, and show you some of the things that I think people don't realize is covered under a cyber liability policy, that you just don't think of it whenever you hear those words. So and then leave some time at the end for questions. So I apologize, I'm looking to the left a little bit, but I can't get this presentation on the screen where my camera is. So I apologize for looking to the left. But so in cyberspace, you have to be right 100% of the time. A hacker only has to be right once. And to put it another way, you just have to be faster or better than the next guy. The way that hackers look at systems is they're doing very broad attacks. They are throwing darts at a wall and hoping one of them sticks. And what I mean by that is they are attacking millions of systems a day, and sometimes attacking the same system millions of times in one day. But what they're looking for are the weakest. They're not looking for the hardest ones to get into most of the time. And if they are, it's not my business, and it's probably not many of your businesses. We're talking about the Target hack, where they spent lots of times trying to find a way to get into Target. But for us, they're just looking for the weakest, easiest ones that they can exploit, get a quick dollar out of it, and move on. Hacking is a business, unfortunately, and that's what they do. So how does hacking happen? These are some of the top ways. The next two screens, we're going to talk about that. User credentials is the number one. Figuring out someone's password and getting into a system or all of their systems that way. Phishing attacks, that's the throwing the darts at the wall. User errors, somebody making a mistake. Malware, which you accidentally download when you're on a website or an email comes in. Misuse, unpatched systems is a huge one. That's not doing security updates to your software or computers. And then web app attacks, that's a newer one, but a lot of those applications on cell phones or apps that you download to your computer end up having viruses to them. So these are percentage. This is back from 2017. A lot of data that you're able to pull on this is old. It takes them a long time to gather this stuff. But if you look, the largest cyber attacks are hacks. That's them getting into your system through passwords, whatever else they might use. Just a software error, a rogue employee is a big one. Human error is giant. Lost and stolen devices. It's why you need passwords on everything, including your cell phones. And then 13% is just unknown. So this is a good representation of kind of what's wrong with the system. I think this is a double-edged sword. This goes back to 2013. But in 2013, 2% of businesses' revenue was spent on physical security, stopping people from breaking in and stealing stuff from your business. And the global losses in that is 112 billion. Cybersecurity, they're only spending 0.4% of their revenue, and the global losses is 3 billion. Doesn't make any sense. Why is everybody spending so much money on physical security for a smaller amount of losses when they're spending a quarter of that and experiencing almost three times the number of losses? Now, I think it's a double-edged sword, because I think the increased spending on physical security helps cut down on the physical theft. But until you get that revenue up, they're just going to keep happening. So we give up.
If I could just make a quick comment on that. Mm-hmm. Those statistics are really jarring for me, and I think business owners don't realize how many digital assets that they have and what they're accumulating. So many businesses, sometimes all of their assets are digital assets rather than physical assets. And, I encourage business owners sometimes to think about when they're prioritizing things, could you do business tomorrow without a couple of desks if they were stolen, or a copier, rather than what about your digital files, that you have. So that's such a great statistic to really show how maybe business owners just are not appropriately valuing which assets they need to spend their money on to secure. So that's a great infographic. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, whether you like the information that companies are keeping on people, and I don't agree with everything that they do, but it's more valuable. Facebook is worth so much money because they have so much data on so many people. Google even more so. So the data these days is worth more than the physical inventory that large carrier companies have. And protecting that, even us, I have 3,500 clients. I have their information in one management system that we use. Now, we secure that heavily and we pay a third party for it. But if I don't have that, I have some backups because I can go to company websites, but I have to figure out which companies to go to because I have 35 insurance companies. So if we have a hack of that system, I got to go to 35 companies to try to figure out which company they're with. So we give up a lot of security for convenience. We do online banking. We buy stuff online. We do medical portals for doctors' offices, remote management, people working from home, single sign-on platforms. And you got to weigh the options there, but spending the money to secure that stuff and a mixture of the convenience is what makes a big difference. The most commonly stolen items is personal information, credit card information, medical records, intellectual property, customer and partner data, network credentials, email addresses. How many spam emails do you get? People sell those everywhere and make a lot of money off of hacking lists from companies and then selling those email addresses to people. So those are the things that are most commonly stolen by people. So let's talk about what you can do to help prevent a loss. The first is some pre-planning. Identify critical information. Work with vendors. Identify good vendors. Make sure that the software that you're using is credible software from a good company, and take a look at their cyber program. When we switched our agency management system to a company called Vertafore, we picked one of the two major ones that are out there, and we read their security documentation before we made that switch, because we were going from having a server in our office with that data on it to moving that data to the cloud, which they have backed up in 10 different locations across the United States. So if one of their farms go down, the other 9 are up and running. But it is all backed up. Their security is top notch so that we know our stuff is secured. You conduct a risk analysis, and I'll talk a little bit about how to do some of that stuff. For smaller businesses, I'll tell you the best way to get this stuff done at a very affordable cost. So what's most important? Your banking credentials, obviously, first and foremost. That's where your money is. So protecting that is extremely important. Cloud storage, remote management, employee PII, that's personal information, credit card information. The one thing I hear from clients more than anything is they take credit cards in their business. Oh, don't worry, the machine that takes that, the company that I use, they're protecting me if that stuff is hacked. They are, but they're not protecting you to the extent that you need. There's some coverage there, but there's usually a limitation of $100,000. That's why you buy cyber liability over top of that, to protect you for larger claims that may come up. Because, and here's another one, they don't protect you if your employees are taking that credit card to the back, copying down all the information, and then they go and use that credit card and they found out it happened from you. That has nothing to do with the credit card company and their machine, but as a business owner, that's your responsibility to protect that credit card information of your customer when they come in. Email addresses, intellectual property, and so on. So risk mitigation response. So a breach response begins before a breach happens. Planning is critical. know your network and devices, train your employees to recognize and respond, and success is measured in hours. Meaning, when they hack your system, the big one that you hear about all the time is where they lock up your system and your files, and they then charge you a fee to unlock that, and they extort you for it. When we talk about success is measured in hours, we've had a client that saw on one person's computer the files start to get blacked out. What happens is you start to not get access to certain folders on your computer. Their IT department got a notification of that, was able to shut the system down, isolate it to one person's computer, and stop a breach from spreading out across all of their systems, saving all of their computers except for one. So and servers. So turning a possible $15,000-$20,000 claim into $1,000 one computer replacement type of claim. So recognizing that stuff. Now, going off the slide a little bit, and I said I'll talk about what's the most important thing. The number one most important undisputed thing that you can do is hire a good third-party IT company to manage your systems. Now, if you have your own IT department, great, but I don't have, our business isn't big enough to do that. It's much more affordable to hire a third-party company for that. We write insurance for a lot of these third-party companies, and you want to get an insurance certificate for them because they need to have errors and omissions coverage. Errors and omissions is for them making a professional mistake. And what that does is it protects you from turning a claim on your own stuff, because their errors and omissions coverage for IT companies is a cyber liability policy. It is a policy that will pay for a breach to your system that they're at fault for it. So you want to find a good company, and here's what they do for you. They're able to solve a lot of those problems that we talked about earlier. They're able to do the research for you. They're able to analyze the products you use and say, hey, don't use this one, use this one instead. They provide, our IT guys are great. We've been using them for years. They provide us with new software all the time. For instance, I use a thing called Passportal now, and our team does. That's where all of our passwords are stored. It's a cloud-based, it's a double login, but we used to put them, people had them on pieces of paper on their desk. That's not very secure if someone breaks in. They used to have them on Excel spreadsheets on their computer. Guess how easy it is if someone hacks in your computer to get that. With this, they got to hack in 2 different ways. Passportal logs out automatically. It's less of a convenience in some ways. I have to log back in a couple times a day, but it protects it. But they provided that for us. The most important thing is they take care of those patches for you. They constantly are upgrading our systems, because when Microsoft finds a security breach or an area of vulnerability, they build a patch for it. And it's your responsibility to download that patch a lot of times, and that's what these IT companies do. So an IT company, and a good one, while it's a cost and people don't love it, it's a necessary cost in today's world. If you use computers in any way, I highly suggest that you have a good IT company backing you up. I mean, even we have a client that's one person. He's an accountant, does taxes and stuff, but he has a third-party IT company that manages his one computer. He doesn't have servers or anything else because, he's handling people's personal information all the time. So that's part.
If I could just jump in there real quick,
Please.
Mike, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
This is. I actually just wrote a blog, and I just did a podcast on this not that long ago for Enterprise Bank, a local lender here in Pittsburgh, and talked a lot about how important it is for businesses to take stock of, or just embrace the reality, right? That a lot of their valuable assets are digital assets, and that they need to spend some time taking an inventory. And I think if business owners if you could convince them to sit down and take an inventory of what their digital assets are and really think about it, right? They would realize how important it is very quickly that they spend some time or spend some money protecting those assets, and you could role play with them a little bit. You know, how problematic would it be if you lost this digital asset or access to this cloud server, or what if somebody hacked your website and took it away? You know, for some businesses that are online businesses, that is their business. They won't be able to take orders anymore. So it is really important to spend some time thinking about these things and spending some money to protect them.
Absolutely. Yep. And I mean, that goes back to that 0.4% of revenue is spent on it. I guarantee you, after Target was hacked, they don't spend 0.4% of their revenue on cybersecurity anymore. And I bet you they wish they would have spent 2% before that happened. On a side note on that, just so everybody knows how that happened, it was actually a Pittsburgh-based heating and air conditioning company. So China had been, Chinese hackers have been trying to get into Target for a long time, couldn't get in because of the firewalls that Target had up. Well, there was a HVAC company that was doing work on Targets, and they had access through the firewall because they'd been sending data back and forth and working. So the company hacked the HVAC company in Pittsburgh and then gained access to Target that way. I bet you they wish that they had cyber liability as well, because they are at fault for that hack. So that's part of what an IT, that I talk about firewall. Nobody really knows what that means unless you're an IT person, but it means everything. It's what stops. We work remote, and every website that every employee accesses from their house on their computer goes through a box in our basement that looks for spam and looks for issues with that website. And there are a lot of websites that get blocked because they're suspect. Emails the same way. We have a thing called Barracuda that stops emails from coming in, sends us a report. Some get stuck in there that shouldn't, but all the ones that are asking me to buy certain inappropriate drugs over the internet or give money to a prince somewhere is all blocked, stopped, avoided, and then destroyed basically by that service. So building your team. Legal counsel is good, is absolutely good to have. They're even better after the fact of that, but talking to them and making sure that you have certain parts of your business to protect you, your business as a whole set up and ready is very important. Number two, sorry, Mike, but I'd switch it to one in this situation, which is network and security administrators. I think is the number one. Insurance agents, because I'll tell you what, a lot of people have a business owner's policy and it says cyber liability on it, but in a minute, I'm going to show you why that cyber liability they throw into your business owner's policy doesn't do what you need it to do if you have an issue. So having a good insurance agent that talks to you about that is important. PR and crisis communication, that and legal counsel can be covered under the cyber liability policy. So that's why these things are great specifically for small businesses, that if they have these issues, it's going to solve them for it. Your decision makers, the CIO, CEOs need to be involved. HR needs to be involved. You know what one of the major issues is with a hack is that even if client information doesn't get done, but your computers get locked up, how many of you have date of birth, social security number, tax, payroll information, tax information, addresses of all of your employees? You know how they feel when you're hacked and they realize that their personal information is probably exposed through that? It's not a good situation. And they need some protection after that fact, which our insurance provides. You can always pay for it outside, but that's that personal credit monitoring that goes on. And then a breach resolution service. So, risk mitigation compliance. So compliance is a big part. Again, that's what your good IT company will do for you, getting that compliance. The larger business that you are, the more employees, the more client files that you have, the more you need to do this on an internal basis. But most small, medium-sized businesses can get these things from our company. But when you talk about the best defense against fines, litigations, is compliance, and it's being proactive with getting the software set up. It all goes back to the more, those safeguards that I have and that my IT department put up is not going to stop a hack. As much as I love that, it's impossible to protect yourself 100% of the time, but I made it extremely difficult for them to get in, and they're going to go to much easier people that don't have the stuff that I have and go that route than they are to go through my route. So insurance. So the policy must meet the needs of the business. We'll talk a little bit about that. Exclusions is huge. A lot of insurance, workers' comp, for instance, is regulated by the state. They tell every company what the policy reads and what the policy does. Auto, they say, here are the coverages you can have. Liability, property, kind of have become pretty standardized. There's a company called ISO that makes forms that most companies use or copy off of. Cyber is the Wild West. It's gotten a lot better from years ago, but it's still not every policy is the same. There's exclusions on policies. One of the big ones is to protect yourself from money being stolen by one of your employees. Is most of them say that you have to do a double, or not from employees, but employees essentially giving money away when you have an email spam or spoofing, is that you have to double check any transfers before you send money, meaning you can't just trust an email. You got to make a phone call in addition. There's an exclusion if you don't make that phone call. There's now, one of the big things that have come up is, and I'm sure everybody's heard this over, especially the last 2 years, multiple authentication. That's when you log into something and then it sends you a passcode to your cell phone or to an email to log in. Those are required on your email now by every cyber company I've seen for the last year. And the reason being is that during the pandemic, that was where most of the hacking happened, is through email, getting into people's emails. And then there's a trove of information inside that emails, client stuff, spoofing possibilities. So the more multi-authentication you can have, that goes back to that convenience I talked about earlier. It's not always convenient, but one little extra step is not a big deal. I have it on my bank account. I have it on my Facebook account because those get hacked more than anything else. As much as I hate having the Facebook account, we need it for business purposes, but I have it on there. The Pass portal has it on. And it's not as bad as you think. Once you're on this computer, it's fine. You don't have to put in every time for my email. But if I try to log into a new device, I get a new phone, then you have to do it at that point in time. And that's just to protect other people from logging in.
I have to say that one of the more effective risk mitigation techniques that we use is our emails will have a banner on them and alert everybody when that it's from an outside sender, right? Rather than somebody inside of our network. So if one of us is being spoofed, somebody gets an email that appears to be from me asking them to do something. If it has this notation or banner on it, it's a pretty good indicator that it's not me, because if it were from me, truly, it would not come with that notation on it. So we've
100%
stopped a lot of bad communications or phishing opportunities or viruses, right?
Mm-hmm.
By having that notation on it.
I mean, that's one of the number one way. That's where the most money is actually stolen, is through that. We had a client who regularly buys properties and regularly would wire money, whether to buy the property, to put money down on the property. And a lot of times he wasn't going through a closing company. Well, and he traveled a lot. So his CFO got an email saying, send us money. It's just a small amount, like $5,000. Sent it. He did it. He did it 10 more times before he was like, this is weird. And guess what? It wasn't $5,000. It ended up being $400,000. It was actually $419,000 that his CFO wired to a CFO too. It's not like it was just a regular person, to a couple of different banks. Luckily, the bank picked up on it, his bank. stopped at about 130,000. The FBI was involved in this, but he was out, 130,000. We offered cyber liability so many times to him, he never took it. He has a huge policy now. But that's part of, and that money is never getting back. The FBI investigates, but they don't get that money back. So a simple phone call would have been fine. It was they hacked in, saw what his email looked like, sent an email looked just like his email. So what Mike's talking about is a huge deterrent from that happening. So then risk mitigation exercises. So training. Part of my cyber liability policy provides free phishing training for me. So I regularly send these programs out, and they try to trick my employees into making a cyber mistake. And it's a teaching experience. I don't fire anybody because of it, but I'm teaching them how to spot that stuff. We talk about it every month in our office meeting. We talk about cybersecurity in some way, just like we do errors and omissions for us. Walk through responsibilities, knowing what people do, knowing who can send and can't send money, training people not to send any money without verifying it on a phone call in addition to an email, 2 types of identification. Allowing enough time, don't make everything last minute. If everything you do is last minute, then people start making mistakes. So trying to get ahead of things, not rush people, that in business in general, that's good. But it also protects you from a cyber area. And then you got to repeat it. People forget all the time. So we do these trainings. I send them to, I have them do some classes. But those quizzes are my favorite. Or somebody, people spoof all the time that doesn't even look like you, doesn't even have your email address, but it'll say Michael McGrory Jr. up on the line, but the email address will be like, you won't even recognize it. And it's a joke in the office. Whoever responds to one of those is in some trouble. But not really. But we talk about it. So everything is about repeating and remembering. So got a couple minutes left. I'm going to go through. This is my cyber liability policy for my agency. You can see the premium on there. It's $2,483 for the year. It's through a company called CFC. They've come out as one of the leaders because of the additional coverages that they throw into this. But it is through, you can see all these stamping and fees. A normal insurance policy, is that too small? Can everybody see it all right? Or should I make it a little bigger? I'll make it a little bigger. So these are through what's called an excess and surplus lines. They're not your Travelers or State Farm companies that you see all the time on the street. These are third-party companies. So the fees and taxes, Travelers is licensed with the state, so they don't see that stuff. But that's how you know you got an excess and surplus lines policy. So when we scroll down here, there's a couple parts to the cyber policy. The first is cyber incident response. So what this is paying is, I'm hacked, people's information is gone. They're going to do incident response costs. Those are the costs that come to me to have people come out and start solving the problem and figuring out what's going on. Legal and regulation costs. So many people don't know this, but there's no federal law on what you do when personal information, when your third-party client's information is stolen from your system or exposed. There's no federal rule. Every state has their own rule. So if you have people in different states, you have to follow what that state's attorney general and laws have set up to do in those situations. Most of them require credit monitoring, paper notification. If the hack's big enough, you have to do a press conference like Target did and some of those larger companies do. So everybody's a little different on that. This takes care of all of it. If I ever get hacked, I just turn into them and they start the process and take care of that for me. IT and security forensic costs, that's a huge one. That's going back and finding out what you had, or even more, recovering what you had. Because guess what? Backups don't always work. And we had a client who was hacked and locked down and had I think it was $1,000, might have been $5,000, doesn't matter, that they could pay to get their data restored by this. And by the way, when people pay that, those hackers restore your data. It is a business. There's a hacking group that was not giving people back their data, and all the other hacking groups attack them because they don't want that. They want you to give their data back because they want to make money, because it's a business, so they turn it over. But nobody would suggest, insurance companies do it, people do it. I never suggest doing that, because once you do that, they know who you are and they know that you pay, and they'll come back again later. But so we had a client who was hacked. IT said, don't pay it. We have backups. We'll take care of it. You know, their backup didn't work. It hadn't worked in 4 months, so he didn't have any. So you better have, and that IT company didn't have errors and omissions insurance, so he didn't have a claim from that standpoint. So that's part of why you have to have a good IT company that does a regular checks on that. I'm just going to run through this real quick and then open up the questions. Crisis communication costs, is getting your name out there, trying to start recovering yourself. Privacy breach management, third-party privacy breach management, that's handling that. You see these limits here, it's $1 million on each one of these coverages. Post-breach remediation costs, that's getting things back up and rolling after the fact. Now, these are the ones that you see more, some of that is covered under your BOP policy that's thrown in. These are the ones that are most important, in my opinion, to businesses, because they're what happens more than anything else. This is cyber crime where your money is stolen. So you have funds transfer fraud. That's what I was talking about, where money's sent wrong. You have theft of funds held in escrow. That's why closing companies need this stuff. Theft of personal funds. Well, not even closing companies. Sometimes you have money in escrow held. Theft of personal funds. So, you know, sometimes people hack the business and then get into the business owner's personal accounts and take their money out. Now, here's the extortion, paying for that, give me my data back. So insurance companies will pay the extortion on things. Not always, just depends on the situation. If you remember, what was it? Atlanta, I think the city got hacked in lockdown, or no, the pipeline last year, they paid the extortion costs to get that pipeline back up and running. Corporate identity theft. So someone steals your business and is presenting themselves as you and taking out funds or loans in your name. Phone hacking, push payment fraud, unauthorized use of computer resources. So these are all little things that you don't think about, but that's protecting your money, your assets. System damage and business interruption. Another one people don't think about. The city, well, I think it was the city of Atlanta, but they were hacked and their systems were down for 7 days. That means no tickets were going out. They weren't bringing any money in that way. They weren't getting any money from meters, because everything's computerized nowadays, everything. So business income and extra expense is huge. That's the loss of revenue you had because you're hacked and your systems are out. System damage, so you're recovering your system and fixing the issues. Additional expense, or, you know, I got to go rent a computer temporarily or a server temporarily to get myself back up and running. That's an extra expense that you normally wouldn't have. It's covered. Dependent business interruption. This actually protects your business if one of, you know, your client, say somebody, you make widgets and the person that provides you the metal that makes your widgets gets hacked, and then they can't provide you stuff for 3 months because they're behind. You can actually turn a claim on your policy because of their dependent. That's a dependent business of yours that had an issue. Consequential reputational harm. They will pay to fix your reputation because, you know, we still talk about Target all the time because of what happened there. I mean, at least I do. Claim preparation costs, getting things ready. Hardware replacement. When your servers are locked down, they're garbage. I mean, I had a client last year that this happened to, and he's like, I got this $10,000 box of junk paperweight sitting in my room now. It's useless. You have to buy all new. It's cheaper just to replace the whole thing. So that's where the hardware came in to take care of that for him. He was the one that his employees were so upset that their information was exposed. So when we got them credit monitoring, it was a big relief to all of them. And then we even have some network security and privacy liability. These are protections for us. Now, the one I want to focus on, PCI fines. That's when you don't have the right credit card information. You know, you're not taking chips, you're sliding instead. You're not meeting what you're supposed to be doing. And that's where you can get fines, penalties, and assessments for that. So you can get coverage for that. Regulatory fines, management liability. Employees sue me because I didn't do enough to protect their information. That's management liability. Privacy liability is I get sued for, you know, somebody's because I exposed somebody's personal information. Network security is the same thing. So, and then media liability. This actually goes beyond just being hacked. I mean, there's defamation. That's us saying something about another person, you know, or company. Intellectual property rights are built in here. So there's a lot of coverages that are built into the right policy. And if you look at that for $2,400, 25, let's round up, $2,500. There's a lot of coverage there. It helps me sleep good at night, knowing I got a good IT company. I got this as backup. So appreciate it. And I will open it up to some questions.
And I'll just make one quick comment before we take some questions, but this is, all of those coverages really highlights how important it is for business owners to get with their insurance professionals to make sure that they understand their business and can make sure that they've got coverage that matches the risks, you know, that the business has. Especially that defamation coverage. There are more defamation cases being filed these days than I ever remember. It's just something that's happening. It's in the news all the time. If you're following the, you know, Johnny Depp, Amber Heard case, it's very prominent right now, but there are many, many of them that are being filed out there. We're seeing a lot of social media defamation that's going on out there. So it's really a growing trend. So it's important for businesses to have that. Just got a revenge porn type call the other day too. You see that kind of stuff out there.
Let me make a quick comment on that too. There is switching over from business to personal. On your homeowner's insurance, a standard homeowner's policy does not come with personal injury coverage. It's an endorsement that you add on to a homeowner's policy. Everybody needs that, especially if you have teenagers, because what you're talking, social media claims are coming in hot and fast, where a bunch of kids are on. I mean, your kid might not even say anything, but they're on a chat with somebody else who's harassing another kid on a social media page harassing. And if you don't have personal injury added to your homeowner's policy, you do not have any coverage to defend yourself for those situations, and they're big. That
could be a whole nother webinar that we could do, because your kids are in some type of a chat group and somebody sends, hey, here's a picture of Janie topless or something like that. You know, your son or daughter didn't invite that, but now they possess something that is very illegal. And you could get themselves into a real jam on that. So, But anyway, why don't we open up with questions? I see Yvette, do you have a question? You want to just unmute and fire away?
Yes. Thank you so much. This was really good. I certainly appreciate it. Your time.
Absolutely. Thanks.
I don't know if I caught all of it. I think you said you don't recommend backing up.
No, strongly recommend backing up everything. But what I'm saying, yes, you want to test your backups on annual at the minimum, more than that. We have two backups. So we have an on-site backup that backs up hourly, and then we have an off-site backup that backs up daily. So a lot of times someone will get hacked and they'll lose a day's worth of information, and that's not a huge deal. But the on-site one is a quick one, but that can get compromised in a hack. That's why you also have it off-site, or it could get destroyed in a flood, in a fire, in a whatever. That on-site one can. So that's why we have but you need to test that. That person the client I had that had the IT company that didn't have errors and omissions, that didn't do the backup right and didn't get rid of that person, had a second hack too from that same person and never fired that IT and hired a new one. And then they're like, well, can you get him insurance? Well, yeah, it's not going to help you for the last two. And then he wouldn't buy the insurance after that. They finally fired him. But you need to check the insurance anytime you have anybody do any type of work on your house, business, whatever. You need a certificate of insurance so that you know that they're going to defend you and they have it. But when you're dealing with a professional like an IT, you need to get a certificate from them so you know they have that errors and omissions insurance. But the good ones do, and they've back. We write lots of them. So,
Mike, I have a question here from Jeff. He asks, if my business is hacked and they get my client's credit card information, how is that liability covered?
Well, there's a couple of areas within that. A policy is going to kick in a few different places for that. So that is the main two that you see on endorsements or on the business owner's policy that I talked about is third-party liability. So that's going to be your main one, is if they sue you because of credit card information, that's where the liability is going to kick in. In that case, it's going to pay a lot of the privacy liability. It's going to pay the fines and penalties you have when their stuff is held, but it's going to do, the policy is going to go out, find all the people who are hacked. It's going to contact them. It's going to follow the state regulations that they're supposed to do because that information was exposed. And then it's going to provide them with what they need. Credit monitoring services and anything else. For me, up to $1 million, they're going to do that. The average cost as of 2019 per client's data that was stolen. And by the way, data being stolen could be a name and an address. That's it. That's technically private information being stolen. Is $138 per person for a breach. That's for not being sued. That's just for taking care of what needs to be taken care of for them. So the average is $138, and that's probably low in today's world because everything's more expensive now than it was in 2019.
See that Mike McGraw has a question. If he wants to unmute and ask it, fire away.
For allowing me to come in. I recently learned of a CPA that had his data stolen with all his clients' information. And apparently he had it backed up. But even though, and then he was asked for some ransomware that he, could or couldn't afford. But I guess the challenge was that the data that was stolen was obviously the client's tax information. So all the opened him up for a liability against all the lawsuits from the tax information being stolen. But if I recall that even the backups were of no value because the criminals had all the primary information. So I don't remember the exact story, but there were some wrinkles there where the backup wasn't as valid as they thought because the original information was stolen and was held hostage.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's why people don't pay that ransom a lot of times, because they have that backup that we talked about. So don't pay the ransom, just reboot your system. Maybe you lose a day, maybe you lose a couple hours, depending on what backup you have. So it is helpful. What people don't know and what people don't think, so people, the old thinking of cyber liabilities, I'm not worried about it. If I get hacked, nobody's going to find out. They're not going to know. Now, what people don't know is you're legally required to report that to the Attorney General's office of your state anytime you're hacked. But that's what I would hear all the time. So I still talk about that, but I focus more on the stuff that people didn't think was cyber liability, which is their funds being stolen. But you are required to report that to the state. You can get in a lot of trouble if they ever find out. But you have these policies and they start providing that protection for the people, and they notify the people. That's what stops those lawsuits. Once you start doing those things and this company and your cyber liability starts doing that, it's really hard for them to make a case to sue you because of that. Because quite frankly, I bet you my personal information has been stolen 20, 30 times now. I mean, it's all out there already. Equifax got hacked. They have everybody's information. So, you know, they have to prove some type of, my understanding is they have to prove some type of damages, but when you provide the credit monitoring, it stops those damages from happening. So reporting it and letting them know, it cuts off those lawsuits a lot of times.
Mike, Ian has a question. Ian, if you want to unmute, go ahead and fire away.
Hi, Michael. This is Ian.
Hi, Ian.
Thank you for the presentation.
Thanks.
So I have an e-commerce store, and we store most of our data on the cloud server. And we also have a small IT team that help us to, for cybersecurity needs. Like when I have a driver's license and I took defensive driving classes, my insurance will go down a little bit. So in our situation, when we have done everything in terms of compliance, will the insurance go down by a little bit, or it all depends?
It will. So it's not exactly the same. Like you take a defensive driving, you get an automatic discount. So, but cyber is a little different. So first, I used to be able to get a company's name, the industry they're in, the annual sales that they did, because it's rated, cyber's generally rated on annual sales. And like one or two, it was 5 pieces of information. I could get that, go to Travelers, for instance, and they'd give me a quote on cyber liability. So I could at least give people an indication on it. Halfway through 2020, that stopped. You need an application to even get indications or quotes now. So there are, I guess the easiest way to answer your question and explain it, there are certain things you have to do to even be eligible, or the companies are going to say, no, we don't want to write it. And then it's like you answer certain questions and it gets a little bit cheap. You answer certain questions a certain way, it gets a little bit less expensive. Other questions another way might go up a little bit. Depending on the industry, we're more expensive than some because we have driver's license numbers, dates of birth, addresses, email addresses, phone numbers for our clients. Doctors, they're the top because they have more information than anybody else. They also have the highest standards that they have to live up to, HIPAA. Lawyers are like in our area, but then you get into like retail stores, even e-commerce, depending on what you're doing, you're probably not taking payments a lot. Like a third party is doing that. Like if you're selling on Amazon, maybe that's what you're doing. Amazon's one processing those payments. You have nothing to do with that. So all that, it all goes into the pricing of the insurance.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, Mike, Lamar has a question here. He is asking, is monitoring a small business's URLs and IP address effective protection? It's sort of a two-part, but that's part one. If I'm understanding,
that's part of it. Yeah, that's hard to say. Like you don't really nobody hosts their websites on their own servers anymore. It's all on a third party. So there's some coverage provided by most of them for it. But the monitoring is important. I mean, that's part of all the backups and things. That's really what the firewall does, is it protects those items and things from getting in that shouldn't get in. Ours blocks international websites or international emails, and then it narrows it down. There's like a bunch of countries where it really blocks it, other ones where it's a little less tight on it, depending on the situation. And we can, that's why it's important to have a good IT guy and know him. He knows I'm not emailing China and they're not emailing me. We don't sell any insurance. We're not licensed in China. Our clients aren't there. So it blocks everything coming in from there. And I don't mean to pick on China. You could choose Russia or whatever country you want to choose, England. It's blocking all of them for me because we just don't do work over there. So I guess I'm not sure if that answered your question, but it's all part of IT.
Yeah, I'll just make a comment on that. I'm not sure what the monitoring is, but what I would say is that I certainly have seen websites that have been hacked or corrupted. And if your business relies upon you having a website up there, maybe you have an online store of some kind where your merchandise is listed, and your URL or your website gets hacked, that's going to be a problem for continuing your business if people, can't see what's going on. I have a restaurant client, had a restaurant client recently whose website got hacked, and every time you tried to access it, some other website came up, right? And it prevented him from taking online orders. As you might imagine, that would be very difficult if people can't stay on your website to submit an order because it's always being redirected to some other, website of some kind. So yeah, I guess it depends on what you're looking to protect, because you've got, you can get your own digital assets stolen or corrupted in a way that disrupts your ability to do your business, but you also could be losing have your customer data stolen or even your own money stolen. So there are lots of different ways this can impact your your business. So
yeah, that's
Lamar,
part of that loss of income there. And if I can make a quick note on that too, make sure your website is ADA compliant too, because it happened with insurance. I'm on a few different forums with insurance agencies, and people were getting letters and being sued because their website wasn't meeting those requirements of ADA. So make sure you have that on your website. And there's a few like $100 a year things that I guess I don't know what you want to call them, but widgets is not the right term, but let's just use that you can add on to your website to make it ADA compliant immediately. But if you have like our company that we use automatically made it ADA compliant, but that's just another little thing you don't really think about, but you don't want to get sued because you're not meeting those compliances
Right.
on that website.
Lamar also asks if VPN, using a VPN is helpful. No, I would say yes, but what do you think?
Yeah, I would say yes too. It depends what you're using it for. I mean, somebody can still hack into the VPN. Your VPN essentially moves you to a different location, for lack of a better term. Like you're sitting in Pennsylvania, but you have a VPN in Florida. So if anybody sees your IP address or what you're doing, it looks like you're in Florida and not here. What I see it used more for, it is used for that. So there's companies that use virtual assistants, and I'll just use the insurance industry because it's a growing part of the insurance industry. So these companies, Philippines is a big location where a lot of the virtual assistants live. And they have their computer at their house, but they log into the VPN, which is somewhere in the United States, and then can go into your system. So that VPN, what it does is if she's hacked, it's really hard for them to go from her computer to the VPN to your servers. The VPN protects them. Plus that VPN controls the security. So you can't make sure that she's got everything that I have, but the VPN has everything that I have to help protect me. So that's a big part of it. And then it's also like we've used a VPN for years, because if I'm at home and I want to get into the server here, I log in through a VPN to get access to the files I have in the server in the office.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is helpful for sure. I just don't think if you have this, like I don't use a VPN at home, and none of my team who has their computers, and most of them are working from home, they don't use a VPN every day because a VPN does slow things down. They just have my computer that's already got all the security on it, so they're good to go.
Are there any other questions? If anybody has one, just feel free to unmute. Yvette, do you have another question?
I do actually have two. One on the VPN. So does that mean that you said you utilize a VPN, then you have your own personal VPN accessing the server for your company? Do you have VPNs for each one of your employees?
No, so we have one VPN that anybody can log into so that they can get to, like we have certain files that are still served, they're still held on our server that's down in my basement. So those shared files that we have on there, anybody can log into that VPN, which is actually on the server in the basement, and then they can have access to that server to get the files off of there. So they have their own logins, but it's one VPN for that server.
Thank you. My other question is, I have many clients, convenience stores, bakeries, coaches who do online coaching, and they don't really feel the need to have any type of cybersecurity or insurance in place because they don't think they're large enough. It's a really tough conversation to have with them when you know that they probably should have that. What's your suggestion?
I use claim examples as suggestions. And I go back and I use a lot what I said at the very beginning, which I can't, for some reason, I can't remember the joke right now, but the joke is like, I don't have to be faster than a bear. I just have to be faster than you, and the bear will get you and I'll be free to run away. However that old joke goes. But that's really the biggest part, is having things set up that they can't, there's easier targets, I guess is the right way to say it. So they're being an easier target by not having any of this stuff put up. If you have McAfee antivirus, it looks nice. It might protect you personally, but it's not doing, at least the basic is not doing what you want it to do. And again, those updates, I don't think people understand how important those updates are, because what it is Microsoft figures out that there's this way to backdoor in, so I don't need your password and I can get into your computer. And that's not like, you might not know anything about that, but every hacker in the world knows it instantly. And then they're just attacking everybody to find out who hasn't patched that yet. And then you're easy target. I mean, that's simple. That's like, that's their dream. That's free money for them. So you need that protection, because it's getting so much worse. If you would see the number of cyber claims and instances that we get now compared to 2019, it's crazy. Working from home has made it 10 times worse because it's so much easier to get into somebody's home IP and then get into their computer there, and that's why we ended up buying everybody laptops. When we first started, they were using their personal computers, and we put an end to that real quick. I mean, it took a while to get them in, but as soon as we got them in, everybody uses our stuff because they have security. But most people aren't doing that. That's why a lot of people do the VPN to avoid buying everybody their own computer, because then they can use their own computer and have the security through the VPN. It was too slow for me.
I have to say, for businesses, letting your employees use their own computers, I know that that's an upfront cost savings for businesses, but basically what you're allowing your employees to do is to have access to your digital assets, save them on their computers, and you have no control over it anymore. And if they no longer your employee, now all of a sudden they have all of your work product on their computers, all of your videos, if you use them, slide decks, blah, 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 whatever it is, that you've paid good money to have created. And now all of a sudden they have it all and they're walking away, and either they have the only copy and now you don't have it anymore and you have to reinvent the wheel, or they have it, but they're going to take it to somebody else and use it over there. So that can be that, I think that's a real problem. And I'd encourage your customers to, think about, what do they think about what do they think the risks are for cybersecurity? Some people might think, well, the only cybersecurity problem means somebody's going to come in and take my client's information, and they'll say, I don't really have much in the way other than their name, address, and email address, so it's no big deal. But maybe they're not thinking about it from the standpoint of, let's say I'm doing online consulting and I've created this catalog of training videos that if a hacker comes in and freezes down my system, now all of these tools that I use to do my work are gone. I can't do what I do anymore because it's all locked down, or it's been deleted or something like that. It could be, I think, catastrophic. So it's, again, I'll say stay tuned to my social media and website next week. I've got a specific post and video about this very thing, where I give business owners, 7 steps to protect their digital assets. One of which is to inventory it, and second is to prioritize it. Think about what those digital assets are and what would happen if you don't have access to them anymore, and what impact that would have on your business. So businesses need to be thinking about it.
Yeah, and gas stations are really tough, because I write a lot of convenience stores, and a lot of, like, all the processing and things go through the if it's Exxon or Marathon or Mobil, like the credit cards are actually processed through them. They take all the money and then they give the money to the convenience store the next day. So there are businesses that have less of an exposure, but they all have an exposure. And there's one thing I forgot to mention, I've noted here. Change passwords all the time, especially the main one to get in your computer. Change it minimum every 6 months. That one should be like no other password. Every password should have a capital, a lowercase, a number, and a symbol in it. Those 4 things. And one of the great things to use is a phrase or a sentence, and you throw symbols in for letters, you throw numbers in for letters. That way, they might be hacked. When they hack and looking for passwords, it is just throwing different options at the wall. And going through the program, going through it. When you have like the word money, but with a 0 instead of an O, it takes almost forever for them to ever get to that version of it. So change it all the time, and don't use the same password for multiple things, because they get that one password and they get everything. And that people used to do that all the time, but there's a lot of people that still do that. Don't use the word password for your password. Don't use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those old things that websites and stuff have started making you not do, but there's still places that do. Some of our insurance companies surprise me when I have like a 6-letter password with no symbols or anything, and I'm like, oh, I gotta go change this. From 2010, they haven't had me change it since then. So
right, or they're using their latest Wordle clue for their passwords. So
yeah,
that's a good segue. As I asked Mike to move his presentation to his contact information so that all of you can see that one more time, just in case you want to get a hold of him or want to direct any customers to him. I'll just say thank you for everybody for attending today. Our next webinar is on May 4th. I believe that one is also at 2 o'clock. It's on our Eventbrite page. And we're going to be talking, again, a little bit more about digital assets and cryptocurrency for estate planning. And we're going to be talking about security in that one too. And that's going to be presented by our partners at Final Security. So I encourage you all to tune into that one. It should be really, really good. I've seen the presentation. It's going to be great. And again, if you want to get a hold of Mike to pick his brain or get some cyber insurance or connect your customers with him, he's licensed in many, many states. So I know a lot of you aren't just from Pennsylvania, but Texas and all over the place. Don't hesitate to give Mike a call and let him know what you need.
Please. Thank you very much. Yeah. You just have some more questions. Feel free to follow up with email, phone number, or phone, whatever you'd like. Be happy to answer them for you.
That'd be great. Thanks everybody. Have a great day.
Take care.
Bye-bye.